This is just to remind you what I spoke about in more detail earlier. I'm going to go right on with other things in a minute. But many of these kids, you don't see the problem until they get to junior high. If I look at the lifespan, I see little kids, teenagers, and adults, the time that they seem to have the most trouble, junior high, high school, and the first couple of years of university. Why is that? Those are the times when you have the widest range of tasks to do with the least opportunity to escape from the ones you're not that good at. If you're lucky, if you can get into university and survive the first couple of years when you've got general education distribution requirements to meet, then usually you're going to be able to specialize in something that you have more interest in, and you've got a better chance of being able to make it work. But a lot of people, including a lot of very bright people, get stuck before they ever get that far. Emily, 13 years old, mother came in and she was saying, you know, we never had much trouble with her when she was in the first 6 grades. She was always doing pretty well. The problems began to emerge when she was in 7th grade, made that critical switch I spoke about earlier between having one teacher most of the day who really can perform a lot of the executive functions for the class and now having 6 teachers every day. Where's the big trouble? Homework. And what this mother described when she was talking about her daughter was that the teachers would begin to say, you know, she hasn't got her math work in. She's missing several assignments of math. And so they'd focus on the math stuff and work really hard to be sure that she got caught up in math. And then about a week and a half or 2 weeks later, the social studies teacher's calling saying this report was due last week, that they were fighting brush fires of late assignments or inadequate preparation. And the phrase that this mother used to describe her daughter's problem in school was she couldn't keep the whole picture in mind. That's a way of describing something which is really very important. As you move into junior high and high school, more and more, you need to be able to keep the whole picture in mind. Now go back to what I was talking about earlier this morning about the driving. You don't want, when you're driving the car, you don't want to have blinders on so you're just looking at what's going on in front of you. You've got to be looking at what's going on aside and in the rearview mirror and so forth. That bigger picture is the difficulty. And you know, there are a lot of people who are really bright who have a forest versus trees problem. They'll be looking very intensively, this is particularly the OCD folks and Asperger's folks, but not just them. It's like they will get so focused on one thing, it's like they're rubbing their nose up against the bark of the tree, but they don't notice where they're standing in a forest. They can't keep that whole picture, because when you're driving a car, what are you doing? You're shifting from big picture, small picture. Focus here, focus there, but keeping the big picture in mind. And in education, when you've got multiple teachers and multiple courses, that's a big issue. I'd like to read one more case example for you, because I think it illustrates a particularly difficult point when in education, and that is the point where you have somebody who's getting themselves in that transition from living at home and going to high school to moving away from home in order to go to college or university. And that's a particularly difficult point for a lot of people to be able to take on those additional responsibilities of managing themselves. This kid, Sean's 18, and he came in and said, this is a direct quote for what he was describing in his difficulties. But before reading the thing, let me tell you that this is a kid who had been an excellent athlete in high school and an honor roll student. He had varsity letters in soccer and in swimming. And he managed to take a lot of very advanced placement. He had a couple of AP courses he was taking during his senior year, scored high in them. And generally, he's a very good student. He was being treated for ADD, and he was taking medicine and was living at home. And during that period, no problem. So here he is now talking about his first year of university, where he'd moved away from home. Like most of my friends, I really look forward to college. All during senior year and through graduation, everybody always talked about how we could hardly wait to get out of high school with those boring classes and ridiculous rules. We were desperate to get away from our nosy parents who were always checking up on us. Have you done your homework? Were you drinking last night at that party? Making stupid curfews, even for weekend nights. For us, college meant freedom. A place where you can take care of yourself and where there's nobody checking up on you. When I really got to campus on the university, it really felt good, but kind of strange. Nobody really cared when I went to bed or when I got up or whether I ever went to class. Most nights I went out for some beers with some guys from my dorm and smoked some weed on our way back. Back in my home, I could stay on the internet as late as I wanted, and then I'd crash about 3 or 4 in the morning. That left me too tired to get up for morning classes. Surprise, surprise. Usually I slept until about noon. I missed a lot of classes and never really got most of the reading done. When I got up, I'd smoke a little more, and then lots of times I felt too tired to get to my afternoon classes. After a while, I just gave up on going to classes. I was hopelessly behind. That's how I failed all my classes and got kicked out of the university at the end of the year. It was kind of a shock to my parents because they never got to see my grades, and until the letter with the bad news came in June, I kept telling them it was hard, but I was doing okay. Think about what he had to do. That he was used to somebody saying to him, okay, you've got that test tomorrow, you've got to get home in time to get a decent night's sleep. Yeah, I know there's a lot of interesting stuff on Facebook and online, but you cannot stay up and surf until 3 o'clock in the morning. You cannot spend 5 hours a day playing World of Warcraft on your computer. If you do this, you are not going to be able to meet the requirements for school. The kinds of supports his parents, something as simple as being sure the medicine got refilled when they were running out of it, before he was out of it. If you're living in a dormitory in university and you run out of medicine, it's very easy to forget that you need to get it refilled, and then you have days where after a while you don't even remember that you haven't remembered. So we talked a little bit about the difference between what it was like living at home and what it was like living in university, and he began to talk a little bit about how his parents had been helping him. And he said, even if they didn't say anything to me, I knew how they felt about what I should be doing. And just knowing that they were there, living in the house with me, and that they'd be worried if I just slept and didn't go to school one day, or that they'd be really disappointed if they got a call from a teacher saying I hadn't turned in some important term project. It's not that they had any real power over me or would punish me, it's more that their presence and their knowing what I was doing, or possibly finding out pretty soon if I messed up, that would usually push me to do what I knew I really ought to be doing. It's like just their being around made this pressure inside me to do the right thing. When I was away at university, I wasn't able to make myself do what I needed to do when I had to do it. I was completely by myself where nobody else around really knew or cared about what I was doing. The level of increase in terms of being able to manage, the demands for being able to manage oneself for something as simple as getting out of bed in the morning and getting up for the class. That is a huge transition for many kids, but particularly for people who are very bright, who have been quite successful for a long time, and typically whose parents have played a big role in providing the scaffolding which has allowed them to get through.